There's a hidden truth about divorce that almost no one talks about. When your ex-wife walks away from the marriage, she isn't stepping into clarity or freedom. She's stepping into a psychological labyrinth she spent years pretending didn't exist. And this isn't about karma or cinematic regret. What's coming is far more subtle and far more brutal. The moment a person trades certainty for fantasy and then has to watch that fantasy collapse bit by bit. Imagine the scene playing out everywhere right now. Countless men sit in quiet apartments, scrolling through their ex-wives' social media, seeing curated posts about new beginnings and personal growth. These men assume she's thriving while they're sinking. They torture themselves with the thought that she has never been happier. But behind those motivational captions and carefully angled photos is a collision course with reality so harsh that her brain will start bending itself to survive the contradiction. When a woman abandons a long marriage, she's not simply ending a relationship. She's leaving behind a psychological structure she unknowingly relied on. For years, you were her reference point. Decisions, moods, long-term plans. Some version of you was always part of the equation. Even when she vented to friends and said you were the problem, her emotional orbit still revolved around you. Now she floats without gravity, trying to convince herself that weightlessness is liberation instead of disorientation. The pattern that follows is almost formulaic. First comes the honeymoon with herself. For a few weeks or a few months, she wakes up exhilarated by her own decision. She rearranges rooms, signs up for yoga, buys new clothes, installs dating apps, just to explore. Her friends shower her with validation. You're glowing. You deserve better. You're finally free. She drinks their encouragement like sugar. During this stage, she's not living in the real world. She's starring in a personalised narrative where she narrowly escaped a dull destiny, and limitless possibilities now wait around every corner. Her phone lights up with matches and messages. She feels seen again, wanted again. She confuses volume with value. She mistakes attention for intention. She confuses novelty with connection, and for a moment it all feels intoxicating. But then the cracks begin to appear. Phase 2 is the awakening. It's quiet, gradual, and hits like slow-motion impact. She goes on her first serious date. The man has good manners, a good career, a winning smile. The evening flows smoothly. But when he makes his move at the end of the night, she freezes, not with fear, but with clarity. He doesn't know her, not really. He doesn't know that thunderstorms unsettle her, that she checks the lock 3 times before sleeping, or that a commercial with dogs can make her tear up. To him, she is not a person with history. She is a Friday night, convenience. In that instant, the first fracture forms in her story. But admitting it now would mean acknowledging doubt, and doubt would force her to question the entire narrative she's selling herself. So she pushes harder, more dates, more nights out, more distractions. But something fundamental shifts. The attention hits differently. The compliments feel thinner. She starts noticing how these men speak about ex-wives, how quickly they escalate physically, how dismissively they treat strangers. And deep inside the subconscious, where uncomfortable honesty lives, comparison begins. The charming man talks over her. The successful one is emotionally distant. The spontaneous one is irresponsible and drinks too much. And without wanting to, she begins to realise why she felt so safe with you. Not because you were perfect, because you were familiar, predictable, home. Then comes phase 3, panic. It usually arrives between month 6 and month 8. The novelty evaporates. Her friends grow tired of hearing about endless dates. If you share children, they begin acting out, confused by their fractured world. She doesn't notice. She's too busy trying to perform happiness, because now that's all it is, a performance. Every "living my best life" caption takes more energy than she'll admit. Every public smile feels heavier. She's acting in a play she no longer understands. Women react to this panic differently. Some go into hyperdrive, more dates, more hobbies, more noise, anything to avoid silence. Others retreat into blankets and scrolling marathons, studying old photographs like crime scenes. But almost all of them share one psychological trick: rewriting history. The marriage she painted as suffocating suddenly doesn't look so catastrophic. The partner she swore she couldn't stand maybe wasn't the villain. The predictable life that once bored her might have been stability, not stagnation. The future she was convinced would blossom now feels like a miscalculation. And here's the part few will ever admit out loud. She can't just acknowledge she made a mistake. The psychological cost would be too high. She built months, maybe years, of identity around being the brave woman who left. Her social circle applauded her courage. Her internal story relied on your inadequacy. To question it now would be to dismantle the scaffolding holding her self-image upright. So instead, she revises the plot. Maybe you've changed. Maybe you've matured. Maybe now, if you were together again, it could work. This mental loophole lets her flirt with regret without confessing blame. Meanwhile, the dating landscape begins turning against her. The pool she thought would be filled with compatible men turns out to be crowded with emotionally unavailable bachelors, married men looking for affairs, and serial daters. There are good men out there, but they're usually taken or flooded with choices. And she's competing with women who have fewer complications, fewer responsibilities, and more time. The realization creeps in like cold water. Her perceived value in the dating marketplace doesn't match reality. Those endless matches she bragged about, everyone got them. Those flattering messages, copied and pasted to dozens of profiles. The chemistry she thought was rare, manufactured by anyone with charm and free time. She begins to see that feeling desired isn't the same as being valued. This is when the panic mutates into exhaustion. She feels drained from pretending. Smiles become automatic. Laughter becomes hollow. Social media becomes a glossy mask. She claims she's living her best life, but she cries quietly after dropping the kids off. The gap between her public persona and private suffering widens into a canyon. And then, without warning, something even darker settles in. The possibility she didn't leave a broken relationship at all. She left a relationship she decided was broken because she couldn't face her own internal unrest. The emptiness she tried to escape followed her like a shadow, because it was inside her, not inside the marriage. Regret whispers, doubt knocks, nostalgia softens edges, and she begins to fear she traded something real for something imaginary. The performance of liberation becomes a cage. The unfamiliar bed becomes too big. Restaurants feel colder without someone across the table. Choices become reminders of absence. Independence tastes like isolation. And somewhere deep beneath pride, a quiet truth blooms. Maybe the life she dismantled wasn't a prison. Maybe it was refuge. Here's where the psychology twists into something more delicate. She can't simply acknowledge that she made a disastrous choice, because doing that would shatter the identity she carefully sculpted. For months, maybe years, she told herself and everyone around her that she was courageous, enlightened, evolved. Her social circle applauded her exit. Her story hinged on the belief that leaving was empowerment. To question it now would feel like erasing herself. So instead of facing the truth directly, she rewrites the script. In this new internal story, maybe you've matured, maybe you've become more attentive, maybe the timing was off. This mental loophole lets her toy with the idea of returning, without ever admitting misjudgment. While she's busy spinning new narratives, the dating landscape delivers its brutal lessons. Romantic comedies paint a smiling world of charming strangers and destiny's timing. Reality doesn't. Single mothers and divorced women find themselves funneled toward predictable archetypes. There are the smooth talkers who view her vulnerability as opportunity, men whose interest begins with compliments and ends at their bedroom door. There are husbands who conveniently fail to mention their marriages until the situation becomes inconvenient. There are serial loners, unattached not by choice, but because something deeply flawed keeps them circling. And while good men do exist, they're often already partnered or have countless options that don't include someone juggling emotional history and children. She starts noticing that the compliments on those dating apps feel generic. They're sent in bulk, recycled across dozens of profiles. The flirty chemistry she thought was rare is something those men can replicate with anyone who answers a text. She begins to understand a harsh economic truth. She's not as special in this market as she once felt. The illusion breaks like glass. Then the fourth phase arrives, the reckoning. It usually hits around the 1-year mark, but some delay it with denial. Her defences, once so sturdy, begin to crumble. She can't perform happiness anymore. The loneliness isn't about missing company. It's the hollow, existential ache of realising she dismantled something real for something imagined. It hits late at night, after another dinner that goes nowhere, after the kids leave for the weekend, after she's scrolled through faces she'll never truly know. She feels the finality. She feels the weight. She has traded imperfect but tangible companionship for fantasies projected onto strangers. Some women feel their emotional systems overload. To survive, their brains numb them, turning down the volume on everything rather than allowing them to drown in regret. That's when the late-night messages begin. They appear in those quiet hours when you're half asleep. They start casually, short greetings, hints about shared memories, jokes you once shared. But underneath, the message is identical. I'm sinking, and you're the only safe memory I can reach for. Some messages radiate anger. It's easier to lash out than drown in remorse. Others sound fragile, nostalgic, curious about whether you still care. What they all reveal is simple. The grass she chased turned out to be painted concrete. Inside her mind, something more complex is unfolding. She's trapped between two realities. One voice says she made a proud, necessary decision. The other whispers that life is objectively worse without you. These contradictory beliefs create cognitive dissonance, psychological static that drains her energy. Sleep becomes inconsistent, appetite changes, focus evaporates, anxiety and depression seep through the cracks. Many women begin to shut down emotionally because honest feeling would require admitting that they tore down their own house. There's a strange phenomenon that therapists talk about behind closed doors. Sunday nights, the end of the week strips distractions away. The house is quiet, responsibilities loom. The kids are gone or sleeping, work waits, and in that silence, the truth surfaces like a body rising from deep water. She sits on the edge of her bed and whispers a truth she would never say out loud. She is lonely in a way independence can't fix. Even empowerment feels like exile when nobody is there to witness your victories. She tells herself she is strong, but strength without comfort can feel like punishment. The universe chooses this exact timing to twist the knife, because while she spirals into introspection, you begin healing. Men often process heartbreak internally, through silence, stoicism, reinvention. They rebuild slowly, new routines, better health, sharper goals. Pain becomes fuel. By the time she realizes what she lost, the man she remembers has evolved. He's calmer, more confident, more grounded. Ironically, he becomes the man she always said she wanted, but the opportunity to experience this version of him has evaporated. That realization is devastating. She sparked his growth, but she will never benefit from it. Another woman might. This becomes its own private torture chamber. She sees glimpses of your life moving forward, photos with friends, healthier habits, subtle confidence. Maybe the kids casually mention how fun your weekend was, how peaceful your home feels. Maybe they mention your new friend in a tone she's never heard before. And suddenly, she understands something she never considered. The marriage's struggles weren't symptoms of your inadequacy. They were symptoms of her restlessness. Seeing you happy confirms the dark possibility that the relationship was never broken, just misperceived. She intended to upgrade her life. Instead, she downgraded her joy. She wanted romance and adventure. What she found was chaos and instability. She wanted attention. What she found was disposability. She imagined freedom. What she discovered was emptiness. And now she watches from the sidelines as you offer connection, growth and stability to someone who didn't have to bulldoze anything to deserve it. Watching someone else enjoy the version of you she always demanded is psychological devastation beyond language. She may never say this to anyone, not even herself consciously, but deep down she eventually grasped the most painful truth. She didn't leave because you lacked something. She left because she believed she was entitled to more. But life doesn't bend to entitlement. The dating market doesn't care about self-perception. Reality doesn't adjust to ego. And by the time her illusions fade, the bridge she burned is ash. She scrolls through old photos. She rereads conversations she once ignored. She pauses over wedding anniversaries she no longer celebrates. Every memory becomes a scar. She begins to realize she didn't walk away from a prison. She walked out of shelter into a storm. From the outside, you look cold, distant, maybe indifferent. In truth, you're healing. You're growing, you're learning. And she's discovering that regret has no emergency exit. There is no graceful return, only the quiet, gnawing knowledge that she traded something real for something imagined, and came away with nothing solid to hold. In the end, she learns a truth society never teaches. Breaking something doesn't guarantee you'll find something better. Sometimes you lose the best part of your life simply because you couldn't recognize it while you had it. And that realization keeps her awake long after the world is silent. Let's shift the lens toward her social environment, because this is where the collateral damage reveals itself. Female friendship networks around divorce operate by rules most people never notice. In the beginning, her friends cheer her on. They applaud her bravery, reinforce her narrative, hype her sense of rebirth. Their energy forms a protective bubble that makes her feel righteous. But as the calendar turns, something subtle shifts in their posture. Married friends begin drifting away, not intentionally, but on instinct. She becomes a symbol they'd rather not stare at for long, a reminder that marriages are fragile, that stability can unravel, that husbands' eyes might wander. Invitations to dinners evaporate. Group chats grow quiet. She stops being included in couple-centric plans because her presence complicates the optics. She then turns toward her single friends, assuming she'll seamlessly merge with their lifestyle. But she quickly learns that dating becomes competition. They are all casting lines into the same shrinking pool of eligible men. Friendship becomes conditional, measured by access and advantage. Meanwhile, she isn't truly single like they are. She brings history, obligations, maybe children. That places her in a different social bracket, an unspoken category no one wants to articulate. The world she assumed would open up instead closes like a fist. Her social circle contracts, leaving her with fewer genuine connections than she's had in years. Loneliness magnifies. She realizes the people cheering her independence cared more about the story than the fallout. And then, another truth punches through. You weren't just her husband. You were her emotional first responder, the number she called without thinking, her default +1 at every life event, the person who held the glue of her daily world. That's not easily replaced. She didn't just leave you. She amputated her own support system. There's a strange psychological phenomenon psychologists whisper about: phantom relationship syndrome. Just as amputees sometimes feel limbs they no longer possess, divorced women feel the presence of the relationship long after it's gone. She turns to share a joke only to remember the space beside her is empty. She hears your voice narrating the day in her head, as if you're still in the background. She wakes up and for a brief moment forgets reality, only to relive the loss with fresh sting. It's not romance, it's neurological architecture. Years of shared routines, etched pathways that don't evaporate simply because she walked out. The world seems determined to remind her. A song you loved plays at the grocery store. She finds one of your old shirts buried in a drawer. The kids repeat a phrase exactly the way you would. She visits a restaurant you frequented and realizes the food tastes blander without someone across the table. These moments are anchors, dragging her back to a truth she's trying to outswim. Then there's the unforgiving mathematics of finding a new partner. If she's 35 or older, divorced, possibly sharing custody, and wants a man who is single, emotionally healthy, financially steady, attracted to her, and willing to inherit another man's responsibilities, the odds border on delusion. Add preferences she refuses to update: height, lifestyle, charisma, and the probability plummets again. It's reality, not cruelty. But she doesn't dare admit this. Instead, she invents coping strategies. She lowers her bar, calling it open-mindedness. She tolerates disrespect and labels it not sweating small things. She accepts breadcrumbs, framing it as modern romance. Each compromise erodes her sense of worth. But the alternative, confessing she threw away something irreplaceable, is too psychologically devastating to contemplate. Some women pivot into radical self-reinvention. They overhaul hair, wardrobe, fitness, even personality traits. But it's cosmetic panic, an attempt to outrun consequences. They aren't evolving, they're shape-shifting out of desperation. The issue was never her hairstyle. The issue was misjudgment. The most tragic arc belongs to those who leap into rebound relationships, forcing seriousness onto flimsy foundations. They introduce children to strangers because being alone terrifies them. They rush into labels, ignore glaring red flags, and treat shallow chemistry like destiny. These attempts implode spectacularly, leaving them wounded in ways they don't know how to articulate. Through every stage, you become the ghost in the room, not because you're trying to haunt her, but because memory perfects what the present ruined. Every man she dates faces the impossible task of beating an idealized version of you, one polished by nostalgia, burnished by regret. You become the mental template, the subconscious benchmark. It's not fair, but it happens anyway. And then, somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, she stands at a crossroads. She can admit the truth, swallow pride, and attempt a difficult conversation. Or she can entrench herself deeper, blaming circumstances, clinging to bitterness for insulation. Most choose the latter. It's easier to harden than to heal. They congregate in online communities filled with other women justifying the same decisions. They amplify each other's narratives. They coach other wives to abandon imperfect husbands. Not because it will help them, but because shared regret feels lighter. Misery becomes communal therapy. Those who choose honesty face a psychological gauntlet. How does one approach someone they wounded deeply? How do you admit responsibility after years of painting yourself as the brave protagonist? How do you ask for forgiveness when you barely deserve it? The vulnerability required feels like stepping into open flame. Some women say the hardest moment of their life wasn't leaving. It was acknowledging that leaving was a colossal error. The emotional gravity is enormous. To return means untangling pride from identity. It means confronting the fact that freedom was never the antidote to emptiness. It means realizing that all the validation in the world can't soothe the sound of an empty house at midnight. And underneath everything, a relentless truth persists. She didn't walk away from a villain. She walked away from someone who would have walked with her. She abandoned the person who anchored her, believing the world outside offered more colour. Now she sees that what she mistook for adventure was simply noise. She traded deep roots for shallow soil, and nothing grows where there's no depth. By the time this realization fully crystallizes, the damage is baked in, and the bridge she burned doesn't rebuild itself. Let's look at what unfolds socially, because this is where the quiet implosion begins. Female friendship dynamics during divorce follow a logic most people never see. At first, her friends act as her personal hype squad. They reassure her, applaud her boldness, and reinforce the narrative that leaving was the correct path. Their approval cushions her guilt, inflates her confidence, and shields her from doubt. But as months pass, something subtle shifts. The married friends she once trusted begin to fade into the background, not maliciously, instinctively. She becomes a living reminder that marriage is breakable, that comfort can turn to chaos, and that no one's relationship is immune. Invitations to dinners stop. Couple-oriented outings quietly remove her from the list. Group chats ignore her messages. Her presence complicates the optics, and people would rather not risk the tension she represents. So she gravitates toward her single friends, assuming she'll slide into their world easily. But she learns quickly that modern dating is not a sisterhood. It's a competition. Everyone is angling for the same small pool of emotionally mature, financially stable men. Jealousies simmer. Support becomes conditional. Success in love becomes zero-sum. And while her single friends travel lightly, she carries history, emotional residue, and possibly children. That categorizes her differently, though no one dares say it out loud. The social landscape she imagined would expand after divorce instead tightens like a noose. Invitations shrink. Conversations dry up. She finds herself isolated in a way she never anticipated. It dawns on her that those cheering her liberation were applauding the drama, not the consequences. And then a revelation hits with brutal force. You weren't simply the man she married. You were the emotional emergency line she dialed without thinking. You were her default companion at weddings, holidays, and hospital visits. You were the quiet structure beneath every ordinary day. Leaving wasn't just romantic separation. It was structural collapse. She didn't remove you. She removed the scaffolding holding her life upright. There's a psychological wrinkle professionals call phantom relationship syndrome. Just like an amputee whose mind still feels a missing limb, a divorced woman often experiences echoes of a relationship that no longer exists. She instinctively turns to share something funny and collides with silence. She hears your voice narrating small moments throughout the day. She wakes up and, for a split second, expects you beside her. The pain, when memory catches up, can be paralyzing. That isn't love at work. It's neural circuitry. Years of routines, shared tasks, and emotional rhythms don't vanish because signatures dried on a piece of paper. The universe seems complicit in reminding her. A song you claimed as yours plays at random. She finds one of your old hoodies tucked in a drawer. The kids replicate your mannerisms. Restaurants taste hollow because food is texture without companionship. Then the mechanics of dating enter the frame. and reality tightens its grip. If she's mid-30s or older, possibly co-parenting, and searching for a man who is stable, attractive, available, emotionally sound, and willing to assume the responsibilities of another man's children, the odds collapse. Sprinkle in physical preferences she refuses to adjust, height, charisma, lifestyle, and her probability sinks even further. She won't admit this truth, not even internally, because doing so would expose the miscalculation she's avoiding. So she negotiates with the discomfort instead. She lowers her standards while calling herself more accepting. She lets minor disrespect slide by naming it maturity. She accepts crumbs and labels it effortless romance. Each concession chips away at her sense of self, but the alternative, facing the fact that she might have thrown away a deeply valuable partnership, is too psychologically acidic to swallow. Some women respond with drastic reinvention. They dye their hair, reshape their wardrobe, overhaul their personalities. They chase fitness, buy new outfits, mimic trends. But beneath the aesthetic panic is dread. They're not becoming better versions. They're becoming different ones, hoping difference will equal value. It's the emotional equivalent of repainting a sinking boat. The saddest trajectory is the rebound spiral. Driven by loneliness, she clings to anyone who shows interest. She mistakes attention for compatibility, chemistry for destiny. She introduces children too soon, hoping to recreate the family blueprint she once abandoned. She pushes for commitment before trust is even a seed. The inevitable collapse leaves wreckage that's harder to heal. Throughout all of this, you exist as a ghost, not because you're haunting her, but because regret polishes memory. Every man she encounters competes against the perfected mythology of who you became in hindsight. Even your flaws are softened by comparison. Nostalgia edits the past like a skilled film director. You become the silent standard, impossible to surpass. Then comes the 2-year crossroads. Some women reach it sooner, others take longer, but eventually she faces a binary choice. She can tell the truth, out loud, and risk the vulnerability of reaching out. Or she can armor herself in bitterness and rewrite the past until she's the hero again. Most choose armor. They join online forums where narratives like theirs are echoed back to them. They coach other wives to walk out, not because it helps them heal, but because shared mistakes feel lighter in groups. Misery is communal sedative. Those who try honesty walk a psychological minefield. How do you approach someone you once belittled? How do you confess you were wrong after branding yourself as the brave one? How do you ask for forgiveness when you're not sure you deserve it? The humility required feels like burning off one's identity. Many women admit that the hardest act wasn't leaving. It was admitting the departure was misguided. The emotional gravity here is staggering. Returning would mean detangling ego from self-worth. It would require acknowledging that independence didn't cure loneliness, and that empowerment can feel hollow when no one is there to witness your growth. All the compliments, all the likes, all the supporters online can't silence the echo of footsteps in an empty hallway. Beneath every layer, a painful truth hums. She didn't leave a monster. She left someone who was willing to grow beside her. She walked away from soil capable of depth and mistook surface glitter for promise. Now she sees the cost of shallow ground. Nothing lasting takes root there, and by the time clarity sets in, the future she forfeited is already gone. You're no longer waiting. The bridge she burned was not temporary, it's ash, and ash doesn't rebuild. Ash.